So, a long time ago, while I was a kid, I loved to use this program, DarkComet RAT, to control little computers that I had lying around the house. And as I grew older, I wanted to use DarkComet RAT as a test bed for a series of vulnerability analysis questions that I had, as well as for practice when it came to reversing all kinds of programs. And I noticed something rather interesting about this program that I thought would be worth sharing. When using DarkComet, if you open up the About we get an audio that plays, a song, if you will, from the original creator. Now, what's interesting about this is that if you open up Resource Hacker and you go to view DarkComet, this audio doesn't appear anywhere under the sound section.
Incorrect password.
We have these regular audios that appear, but we don't actually have the song. And this piqued my interest because I was wondering, how can this program play the song if the song doesn't come in any form of a resource, as well as doesn't show as any kind of an audio file? So if we look for WAV. So clearly the program isn't grabbing it from a file, and it's not using it as a resource that's bound to the binary. So how is this file actually playing? And I got my answer by viewing the application inside of API Monitor. So if I run the application,
Sound activated.
you can see that it plays the audio that is the resource for the sound activated. However, when I open up the About, we can see that it doesn't actually load a resource. It instead calls waveout open and then writes the raw audio, as well as keeps track of the timing within the audio using waveout get precision. DarkComet uses what's called a ring buffer in order to achieve this looping audio effect. It fills 65,536 bytes of PCM to a buffer, and then it loops the playback and generates the quote next quote audio from the PCM using CPU logic. It updates the buffer internally. So this is how chiptune audios are played inside of DarkComet. So this means that there's no static wave file that's used, and the song only lives in RAM, so you'll never actually find it on the disk. And this presents a struggle in order to grab the raw audio, because you can't just download it or grab it from a file. You have to actually extract it from RAM, but there is internal processing that's happening on the audio while it's being played. So it's not something that you can just grab. You would have to track the actual audio changes that are made to the buffer while it's playing, and then reconstruct that audio by monitoring the memory changes and keeping track of the actual timing using the wave out get position functions. So what's important from these calls here is if we go to our open and we go to our wave format, this tells us the actual format of the audio. So you can see that the format tag is telling us that it's going to be in PCM. 2 channels means that it's stereo. The samples per second is our frequency, so that's 48 kilohertz. And then in the size, it's quite interesting. This is not a standard size. There are extra bytes associated with each PCM. I didn't look too far into this. I'm guessing that it has some symbols that are associated with the actual chiptune itself, but it wasn't important for the extraction of the audio. So then if we go on to our prepared header, this is where we actually see where the audio is located in memory inside of LP data. And then you can also see in the buffer length, this is the actual size of the audio itself inside of memory. So at LP data, this is the size of the actual music. Now, what's interesting is if you rip this straight from, if you rip the full 65,000 bytes straight from that memory address, you will not get the actual audio. What you'll instead get is a small chunk of the raw audio that then gets changed by the actual DarkComet application itself when it is actively timing its song. Now, to get around this issue, we wrote a script that not only reads the wave format in buffer, but also the time bytes associated with the looping audio. So we poll every 5 seconds and read the current time bytes. Then we compute the number of frames that have played since the last check. We then compute the ring buffer offsets, and then we dump those raw frames to a wave file. This produces the actual bit-perfect PCM audio from the application without using any kind of audio loopback devices or anything of that kind. Now, while it would be easier to just record the audio using an audio loopback, what's important about this is that if you have any kind of underlying not stenography, but like data that's hidden inside of an audio, then this technique would grab that underlying audio because it's purely recording the memory as the proper format and in the proper timing to a file, rather than just recording what's coming through your speakers. And so that's important because if you have any kind of audio data that isn't necessarily being played, but is there in the memory, then this technique will grab it while audio recording straight will not. And this could be very important in a few different scenarios, the biggest one being in CTF challenges. If there is audio that is not stored as a resource and is not stored as a file on disk, but you still need to be able to do memory analysis on, then this methodology of finding the audio, recording it straight from memory, adjusting its timing, would capture the important details inside of that audio in a way that you could still analyze at a later date. As a result, our final audio, after a little bit of trimming, sounds something like this. This preserves the audio quality, preserves the audio integrity, preserves the timing, and does all of this without ever having to find a file or, work through resources. This is all purely from memory.